I know that I'm recording because now up in my toolbar there's this little stop button. So it's recording my audio and everything I'm doing on the screen right now. Okay? So when you submit these assignments, you're going to do so by a screencast, and you'll meet these other requirements too. Now here's a reality. Most of you, even experienced 3D modelers, if you're new to Rhino, you're probably not ready to sit down and record a screencast right now of those particular builds, because it might take you an hour-ish, 2 hours-ish. And you don't want to turn in a 2-hour screencast, because I'm not going to watch it. I'm just going to say, practice again and re-record when you can get the time down a little bit. You're going to rebuild these models multiple times. That's one of the ways that you can learn about the tools in Rhino. And I say that because I don't want you to be discouraged if you feel like it takes a while to think in this particular way. If you've never done any 3D modeling before, it's kind of weird to get your head around. And actually, it's going to be even harder for some of our experienced people because Rhino is really different than the other two common tools. Most of you who have 3D modeled have used either or both Inventor and or SketchUp. How many people have used Inventor before? Okay, how many have used SketchUp before? Okay, other 3D modeling software, there's actually lots of others out there that you've used potentially. Don't be intimidated if you're brand new. You actually have an advantage because you've never 3D modeled before, and you get to think about this interface instead of having to think, well, how would I do this in Inventor and how would I do this in SketchUp? Let's start. All right, so yours should show templates. Yeah. So you got an email for a download link. In that email was a license code. You should be able to copy that and enter that license, and you should be good to go. So templates. I like using metric. Measuring in metric is a good thing. What's up?
You should email me the download link.
We'll talk later. I like using metric. I love when I'm commanded. You should do this. Don't talk to me right now. And that's now on the video and the audio too, so that's amazing. Because we're all going to re-listen to this like 12 times, right, Abby? Just tell me what I want to hear. I'm not going to listen to it. Okay? Just wait for Matt to move on to something else. Metric is better. Our machines speak metric. It's a lot easier when you're doing geometries dividing by 10 than dividing by 4 or 8 or 16. So I'm going to push you to use metric as often as possible. Now, knowing full well on the first couple builds, they're built in inches. So if you want to play around with that, in either inches or millimeters, I don't have a preference. I've selected small objects millimeters as my default. Notice as I click on some of these others, there's the option to make them default. At any time, you just pick the template that you want, and you open a new document by double-clicking. So go ahead and do that. Yeah. Yeah.
In one of the videos I was watching last night, they said the small objects template are things smaller than a car. And the large objects template is something larger than a car.
Nice. That's a really good point of reference. Awesome. So small or smaller than a car, large or larger than a car. Cool. I like that. Okay. First thing you probably notice is that your window looks a little different than mine. You probably don't have all of these additional tabs up at the top. And the reason that I have them is because I've been learning Rhino the same way you are. I'm using tutorials. And most of Rhino tutorials are for Windows. So let me show you this. Go to Rhinoceros, go to Preferences. Try to follow along with me here. We're going to pick up the pace. I know this is boring. Preferences. Now you want to go to Themes. I'm showing you this because you're probably going to change back and forth. Right? Click on Themes, and I have selected Rhino for Windows. If you want to make your screen match mine, I don't care about name and organization.
I can't finish.
You got to choose a name and organization first. I don't care which theme you choose. If you want to match mine for right now, just choose Rhino for Windows. And then you close this, and nothing happens. So what you have to do is actually open up a new window, and let me choose Rhino for Mac so I can show you the difference here. Here's the basic difference between the two. So on top is Rhino for Windows, on the bottom is Rhino for Mac. Arguably, the Mac interface is simpler. But for me, I actually like having access to all the buttons and everything kind of in front of my face. So I prefer the Windows environment. You decide which one works for you. You're going to see pretty quickly, I actually access commands by typing them in more often than I click on buttons. So actually the interface doesn't really matter a ton. So pick one you want to use, and let's talk about these viewports. You have by default 4 viewports: the top, the front, the right, and the perspective. You can navigate around them by doing the magical Mac 2-finger scroll around. So 2 fingers down, make sure they're separated a little bit. Sometimes kids have trouble because they put their 2 fingers right next to each other. Separate your fingers and kind of scroll around. What I'm doing in the top view is panning, panning, panning. And then you go do that same move in perspective, and now I'm actually moving in 3 dimensions all at once. If I want to zoom in and out, it's the pinch move. We all know the pinch. We're in the smartphone age. We can pinch pretty well. And then if you do 2-finger scroll with shift being held down, you can do the pan. Okay? It's going to take a while to get used to the interface. You'll get better at that as you go. Some people prefer not working in all 4. They'd like to just work in one of the views. You can always get in and out by double-clicking the name. So I'm just looking at a perspective view here. Double-click will take you back. You can also hit this one, which will restore those original 4 views. You got lots of ways to do everything in Rhino. Okay? Another tip, if you have a mouse, if you have access to one, you may find 3D modeling a lot easier on a mouse than a trackpad. I've learned how to do it on trackpad just because I have to, but it's not my preference. All right, let's make our first shape. I want to start with something basic. We'll draw a rectangle. Somewhere in these menus, buried everywhere, probably in the standard menu, maybe in the curve tools menu. Sometimes it's in multiple places. Yeah, there's a rectangle. I hate searching for stuff. Rhino does a really good job of making it accessible via text. So in most cases, if you know the right word and start typing it, it'll give it to you. So I want a rectangle. I'm going to type that. Not hitting anything else. I'm just going to type the word. And I don't even have to type the whole thing. It'll autocomplete it for me. That is the one that I want. If I want to pick one of the other ones, I can. I'll do rectangle and hit enter. Now Rhino's asking me for a question. Where do you want to put your first corner? You can start drawing in any one of these viewports. You can start drawing in one viewport and finish drawing in another viewport. Rhino actually gives you a lot of freedom. Notice if I start in the top viewport and then I jump down to the front viewport to finish, watch what happens on the top right view. I was drawing on the floor, but now I'm drawing on the wall, right? So it's nice that it actually animates all the views all at once. If yours isn't doing this nice little snap thing, you might not have grid snap turned on. So maybe you need grid snap turned on. You also have these other snaps on the left. We'll use a couple of them today. You can turn those on and off in the middle of drawing a shape, which is one key difference from either SketchUp or Inventor. You have a lot of selections and changes you can make in the middle of a drawing. For right now, I want to draw a 10 by 10 rectangle, also known as a square, on the floor. First corner, second corner, boom, I got a rectangle. Okay. I can type rectangle again if I want to draw another one, or a quick way to get last command is just hit return. So I'm going to draw another rectangle, this time one in the front view, and then I'll draw one more in the right view. So I've drawn part of a cube. So try that. Try drawing one 10 by 10 rectangle in each one of these views.
Where do I go to get it to snap?
So grid snap should be turned on. Yep. And there's another thing to play with too. If we have time today, we'll talk about different settings for grid snaps. Be really intentional about your grid. If you know how you want to build an object, set up your grid so that it will help you. Okay, so I can rotate this thing around. I can look at the top, the inside, the bottom. Now let's do a 2-finger click. So 2-finger click on the background in the perspective view, and notice you have all these other view modes. Just play with those view modes for a second, would you? Let me show you that again. In the perspective view mode, do a 2-finger click down, and then play with these different view modes. Shaded is used pretty commonly. Notice it does very little to our image here. Pen is another cool one. We get the grid goes away. We get black marker on a white background. But our shape is pretty boring right now. So these different views don't do a lot. Let's make a solid instead. You could construct the rest of the sides of the cube if you wanted to make a solid, but I don't want to build a solid that way. So I'm going to take these two rectangles off. I'm going to click on and delete. And instead, I'm going to introduce you to the extrude command. Okay. If you want the button, you can go to Solid Tools and find it down here. It's the extrude curve. Or like me, with a little bit of practice, you'll learn some of the vocab and you'll just start typing it. I want EXT. And there's actually a lot of different extrudes. I think there's at least 2. There's an extrude surface, but it's not giving me that one right now. I don't know why. So you want extrude curve. And then just like we did with the rectangle command, Rhino's asking you questions now. It's saying, which curves do you want to extrude? Well, I'm going to click on one. It's not a very curvy curve. It's pretty straight, but it's a curve. And then you can go click done, or you can always hit return. I hate moving my mouse if I don't have to. And then it asks you for an extrusion distance. Notice these other options you have here too. Maybe you want to click both sides. So it'll actually expand in both directions. So I want to turn that one off. Maybe I want to delete the square that I based this on so it doesn't leave behind that actual original square. I am going to do that. And then you could do something that's not a solid. You could bring this thing up and it would just create the outer walls. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it as solid and delete input. And then I could jump down here and measure it, like its height to go exactly to 10. I could also do that from the right view. Or it's usually faster to just type the length. So I'm just going to type 10 without clicking anywhere else. It puts my text right in that box and says, there it is, height of 10. So it's nice. You don't have to do a lot of clicking. Now if you switch your view modes back to something like shaded, you have a solid object. It didn't look solid because of the view that you were in, but it is. Some people like the X-ray view where you can actually kind of like see through objects. I like the technical view. It looks more interesting on some of the other ones, some of the more complex builds. Okay. I'll stick with shaded for right now. Okay. Now I would explore some of these other tools. The chamfer tool, for example, or excuse me, the fillet tool, for example, allows me to very quickly create some complex geometries. Don't try to follow along because I'm going super fast. But I can create a complex geometry by choosing some sides and adding fillets. This is powerful in the way that Inventor was powerful.
How do you do that again?
Okay. You do this one. I think you can search for it too. I think you can just search fillet.
Well, I just want to know how you
Variable fillet surface. Yep.
I can get to the fillet screen, it's just
Yeah.
I can't fillet the spray.
Let's do some subtractions now. Let's take away from this solid. So I want to make a cylindrical hole that goes down through this thing. So let's draw in the top view. And I want to draw a circle, so I'm going to type circle. And I'm lucky because of how I set up my grid. I can actually go find the center point. Like I know that's in the center. But you can use O-snaps, these guys on the bottom, to actually make that way easier. So let's turn on the midpoint O-snap. And then watch what happens. So we select midpoint. And then select the other midpoint. And it's essentially drawing in for you guidelines that tell you it's dead in the center. I'll do that for you one more time. Make sure the midpoint O-snap is turned on down here on the left. Bring up the circle command. Again, I just type it. And then hover over right about where the midpoint should be, and it should jump right to the midpoint. And then without clicking down or anything, I'm just going to go find the other midpoint. That says, oh, I know about those. And then the combination of those O-snaps and then this thing up here called Smart Track, it's really trying to be helpful. It says, oh, you want right there. Now I have an intersection and I can create a circle. Notice the circle is trying to jump to very specific radiuses. But I don't like any of those options. I want mine to be 3.5. So I'm just going to type that number, 3.5. And notice that it actually goes now in between those grid measures. Here's what I would have done before in SketchUp. I would have drawn a line connecting midpoint to midpoint, drawn another line connecting midpoint to midpoint. Then I would have drawn a circle. Still not slow, but I would argue with the O-snaps it's all way faster. Because I can basically do that now, just like we just did, by midpoint, midpoint, center, done. Okay. You will get more efficient over time with these tools. If things aren't working, and one thing that'll happen is you think you're working on one surface and then all of a sudden a point goes like way over there in 3 dimensions. You're like, what the heck happened? It's almost always your O-snaps. Some people get excited and turn them all on. Like if 3 is good, 10 is better. Sometimes it's not. Like usually when I'm done with an O-snap, I'll turn it back off. Casey.
Also with the O-snaps, a quick function for anybody who wants to know, if you have all the O-snaps on and you don't like them constantly on, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a disable O-snap option. And if you disable all, then hit the option key, then it'll enable those only when you're holding the option key.
So you can basically quickly toggle them on and off. Yeah, that really can be helpful. Okay, now we're going to do something that in the physical world isn't helpful, or actually isn't possible. You're going to take a cube, so imagine you're holding your cube in your hand, and that's totally solid, right? Now we're going to take a cylinder, which is also totally solid, and put it inside the cube. But we're not going to lose any of the volume or the mass in either one of those two. So a fully solid cube and a fully solid cylinder are going to occupy the same place in space. Physically, that's impossible, but in Rhino, we can do it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and extrude. We're going to create that solid cylinder the same way we created our cube by going extrude surface. This time, we're going to click on that cylinder. And we're going to extrude it down through. I like to go a little bit farther than I need to go because I'm using that piece to cut a hole. So now if you look in this perspective view, you have just created an object which could not exist in the physical world, which is pretty cool and potentially like weird because you think, oh, this makes sense. I obviously have already cut my hole. No, you haven't cut a hole. We got to do that now. Inside the Solid Tools menu, there's this one called Boolean Difference. So go ahead and click on Boolean Difference. This is a subtraction command in 3 dimensions, which is really powerful. So if you click on it, the first question is, what are you subtracting from? Well, I think about that as I want the cube to stick around. I just want it to have a hole in it. So I'm going to select the cube, hit return. Then what am I subtracting with? So what's my cutting object? It's going to be the cylinder. And hit return. And now I have a cube with a hole in it. Okay. Now we're back to a thing that you could actually have in the physical world, right? Like you could have a cube with a cylindrical hole cut in it. Okay. You can do so much with just those tools. For example, you can make this entire shape. Where is it? Right here. You can make this entire shape with just the tools we've looked at right now. Precisely. With extrudes, circles, and rectangles, you can do it. The only one that would give you a little bit of a fit here is this 30-degree angle, and we're going to handle that rotation right now. Okay. So those are really powerful tools. Let's talk about the gumball tool. So go up to the top, make sure gumball is selected. If it's off and you click on an object, it just does a simple selection. But as soon as you turn on gumball, you get this really complex tool. As you do more with Rhino, you will love gumball more and more and more because of all the stuff it can do. So take a minute and play with the gumball tool, would you? Maximize your perspective view and start grabbing on things and moving them. For example, I'm going to grab the red arrow and move. Notice it's moving my cube only along the red axis. That's cool. The blue one would move it vertically. The green one would move it back along the green axis. Okay? So that's one of the things the gumball tool can do is move stuff. Here's another one. You've got these arcs on the back. Let's say you want to rotate. You can grab one of the arcs and start spinning your object around. Look in the bottom right-hand corner when I rotate. Watch what happens. Do you see the number down in the bottom? That's an angle measurement. It's actually measuring the rotation degree. So I can be very precise. If you don't like the snaps it's giving you, double-click on it. Tell it exactly how far you'd like it to rotate. 32.7 degrees. It can do that. If you want to make copies, hold, I think it's Command. Hold Command, click on an arrow, and move. Nope, that was wrong. It's Option. Hold Option, click on an arrow, and move. I just made a copy. Oh, shoot.
If you have a surface and you move and you hold Command, it'll create an object. And
Right.
if you have a line, it'll create a surface.
It's cool. And you can, that's kind of like extruding to
Yeah.
some degree. Yeah. What else can I do with this thing? Oh, you can grab this little thing, this little plane, and it'll allow you to move now. Here, I got to show you this in 4 views. It allows you to move in 2 dimensions at once, which is pretty cool. So let's use it to make some copies and do some rotations. First thing I want to do is make a copy of this, so I'm going to move it over. And you know what? Before I do that, I lied. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate this thing down 90 degrees. And then I'm going to make a copy. And now I can actually peer down the middle of this thing. One of the things that's very common, and it's one of the first things you'll do in this class, is you're going to make things that are designed to fit together. And so being able to fit them together in software first is really important. All I have to do to fit these 2 pieces together is grab the corner. And this all, again, is going to be controlled by O-snaps. Intersection O-snap should be enough. I'm going to grab that corner and drag it, and it should snap. Okay? And then if you want to be able to move them as a single object, you can select them both and type group. Now I have a single gumball tool in the middle and a single object, which would, if I were to 3D print this right now, it would print as a single solid object. It would not have a seam in the middle at all, which is awesome. And then you can undo that as well. So if you want to ungroup an object you've grouped, you can get those 2 separate pieces back. Okay. I want to show you one more copy command because I just think it's really slick. And it allows you to create some interesting geometries very quickly. And I want you to try to follow along with me on this one. So you got some kind of a cube. Whatever your object is, you got on screen in 3 dimensions. Let's go to the top view. And I'm going to change the shading because that looks really confusing. So I'm going to go shaded. There's my top view. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Here's my end goal. I want to take that square, that rectangle, make a whole bunch of copies of it. And while I'm making copies, I want to rotate it around a central point. What I think about here is making a gear. So for example, if you have a circle and you draw 1 gear tooth, you could make copies, rotational copies all the way around the outside. So here's what you do. First, you got to find a center of rotation. It doesn't really matter where you put it. I'm going to draw a circle because visually it helps me to have some kind of circle as the middle of my rotation. It helps me kind of envision what this thing's going to look like when I make copies. Okay? And all the circle's actually doing for me is providing a center point. Visually it helps me see it though. So go to Transform. Go to Array. Notice there are a lot of versions of Array. The most common ones are rectangular, polar, and linear. Although a long curve and surface are pretty interesting. So you can draw this complex curve and then basically like make copies of the cube that would follow along that path, kind of like a roller coaster, right? Like they're all going to kind of attach themselves to this complex path. We're going to do array polar. Okay? And then it's asking us questions. What do you want to array? Well, I want to take the cube, not copying anything else, so I'll just hit done. Now, where's the center of your thing? Well, I can't really see the center point on here very well. So I'm going to go back to O-snaps. And then I'm going to go to the center, and it's not highlighting. It's not saying there's the center. Well, in Rhino, if you want the center of a circle, you actually have to go to the edge. It's going to draw a radius line and say, oh, you must mean the center. Yes. So I'm going to click down. And I got to tell it, how many do I want after I've made all the copies? So how many total? I'm going to say 8. This menu, honestly, I have no idea what this is doing. Every tutorial I've seen, they just hit return through it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit return. I don't know what this particular option does. So I'm going to hit return, and then I get my first preview. I'm going to hit return one more time. Now I've created a really interesting complex geometry pretty quickly. I'll show you one more. Let's say I really like that one and I want to make a copy of it. I'm going to select all those and group it. And then I'm going to use something called the mirror command. This is the one I lamented when we had to switch from Inventor over to SketchUp. I missed this one so bad. So I'm going to type mirror. And it says, what do you want to mirror? So I'm going to select all the things I want to mirror. And then I simply draw a plane. Basically, where is the mirror going to live? And look at what it's doing here. I've only clicked down one. I could draw a mirror like that. Or I could have a complete exact copy on the opposite side. I'm going to zoom in so I can see that. And I've now created a mirror image copy on the other side. I use that mirror, for example, in one of these builds. This one is a great one to use mirror on. It should be build 3. No, it's build 2, I lied. This one is a great one to use mirror on because you basically can build the geometry on this half and then mirror it to the other side and you're done. As you spend more time with a program, you should try to think about how could I save myself a little bit of work. But you're going to spend a lot of time just trying to get it to work at all. Really. As you talk to people who are learning how to 3D model, it's a ton of frustration at the beginning. There's a ton of resources that are on Trello for you. Inside Rhino, they have a help menu. It's great. You can search for, hey, where is that mirror command? Look at this. And it shows you exactly where to find it in the menus. Okay? It's a really helpful help command. They also have links to tutorials in here. Hey, I want to learn Rhino. There's tutorials. They have examples. Lots of stuff built in. They'll take you to training links. And with most things in our day and age, if you want to learn about it, YouTube probably has about 90 different videos on that thing. So there's a ton of stuff there. Case?
In the Mac side, if you're in the Mac settings, there's a right side toolbar. If you open the help menu in the right side toolbar and then select a tool, it will tell you how to use it.
Awesome. So here's what I just did. Let's do that. See this little button on the top right? That's a great tip. Click on that. And then you get all kinds of information. This actually is a record of every single thing we've done so far together. Looks like gibberish. And then you can decide what's being displayed. I think that's your, I think they call it console view. No, command history. He's talking about help. So if you select help right here, this question mark, and then go over and pick a tool, they're going to tell you exactly the options you can use. On some of these, the help menu is actually even animated. So like on the surface tools or curve tools, I think it animates the rectangle. Yes, there's little videos that show exactly how to use that tool. So there's tons of resources for you.
Like help section, it's actually helpful.
Yeah. Tons and tons of resources. And then you should be learning along with other students. We as a school are getting away from SketchUp as fast as we can. Rick and Diane are going to use Rhino in their class this semester. We've started buying licenses. We'll be installing those on your machines soon. It's gonna take a while. SketchUp does suck. I'm very comfortable saying that. It's gonna take us a while to get used to this, but we'll get there. Here's the other thing you have to remember. I would love to sit down side by side, us on a computer doing some 3D modeling together, because I don't have to get myself excited about this. I friggin' love doing this stuff, and it gets even more exciting for me when we get into programming, because that's what I would do all day, every day if I could. So again, it's a big, long process. Be patient with yourself, please. It takes a long time. And if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, you're in a good spot, because this is maybe the most powerful program you've ever used. And if you've never 3D modeled before, it's really hard to think in this way. So give yourself some grace. Give yourself some time. Okay? You're going to hear about a deadline from us this afternoon. We'll give you a sneak peek. We're going to ask for the first one of these builds to be done before the end of the week, like Friday afternoon into the day. And that's going to be pretty stressful for a lot of you. So I want you to remember what we talked about with deadlines this morning. Our deadlines aren't going to be perfect for all of you. There's no way. So what we want you to do is work on it and make progress. And just stay in communication with us. If you need more time, you need more time. Okay? I think that